Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is once again time for your favorite list podcast 10 to 1. I am one of your hosts, Josh, joined with me as always by the greatest co host to the left of the Pacific Ocean, the center.
Well, only if you're looking at a Decatur map. So, I mean, if you're looking at a globe, probably no, that doesn't really make sense. And also, if you're like in Taiwan, no, that doesn't make sense. And also, if you're in Australia, also that doesn't
Hmm,
make sense. So,
makes
yeah.
sense.
How about I'm the special podcast host from the Pacific Islands who I don't know. I have no idea what other superlative I could put in there. But anyway,
The
yes,
best
here
co
I am.
host sitting in proximity to volcanoes. Jen.
Sure. Yeah, sure. Yeah, let's go with that. Let's go with that.
That's why this is not your favorite
It's
geography podcast.
it definitely shouldn't be anybody's favorite geography podcast because I feel like half of the time I was just having this conversation with somebody else. Um Most of the kids that grow up here don't understand that they're not connected to the United States. They see themselves as one of the 50 states. And yes, they live on an island, but they do not really understand that when we talk about the mainland, they think that's just another island. No, that's actually a continent and it's pretty big. But it's really funny when you teach a kid that Hawaii is so far away from the continental United States because they definitely don't feel that way. They're like, oh yeah, the mainland, the United States, it's just like another island. It's hilarious. So no wonder we don't know geography out here. That's probably why.
On a similar note, growing up in Alaska, it's sort of kind of the same, but a little bit opposite.
Mm,
They know, of course, that Alaska is part of the U.S., but they well, you know how you might have heard Southerners will talk about the northern states like them people up there.
yeah.
The when I was in Alaska, they were like, no, all those people in the lower 48.
Yeah. Yeah, the people in Hawaii call it the mainland. So, you know, you're a mainlander. Um and but even still it's just so funny because this is we uniquely have such an odd relationship with the rest of the United States. I mean, we're part of the US, but I would say that we probably reflect something a whole lot different than US mainland culture. So it is definitely very different, but if you ask kids to point out where things are, they don't know. They don't know. They're still looking for another island in the Pacific Ocean called the mainland. It's kind of fun.
Well, to be fair, Hawaii does have like new islands popping up all the time, right?
I mean, it's true, but none of them are going to be called the mainland. They're going to be called something that is uniquely Hawaii. It has significance in the Hawaiian language,
Hmm.
and also, yeah, no, there's also I think it has to do with like the vastness of the United States. People just don't understand it. I can still remember when I was a kid growing up in New York, and I had a friend who, I mean, to be fair, some of these people they don't leave within 30 miles of where they live. They spend their whole lives in this like very small little bubble. And I had explained that I was going to be traveling to another state and that it was really far away, and they simply couldn't fathom that you could drive that far. Like, aren't you going to fall off of the edge of the country or something? It's really funny. I think this is a cautionary tale to the American educational system. We need to get a little bit better here, guys. We got a bunch of kids that are really confused about where things are. We should definitely clear that up.
Yes, yes, indeed. You know what else should be cleared up, Jen?
Tell me.
What our lists are about tonight.
All right. So I'm bear with me for just a couple minutes here. We're gonna be closing up our uh, room here for AC, so it's a little bit loud because there's outside traffic. So just bear with me. Okay, so tonight's list is this. I specifically sort of decided that pre Valentine's Day, it would be interesting to see what kind of unconventional romances we could come up with, because I do think that there's a place in our list making process for, you know, really good romance stories, you know, the ones that really touch our hearts and make us go, oh my gosh, that's amazing. But they're a little bit more conventional generally, although I think some of the ones on my list definitely rank right up there for me. But these are romances or relationships that sort of defy the norms of society. They define, I mean, they defy um the just the way that we normally look at a romance as, oh yeah, that's totally okay. You know, we would definitely invite all of those people over to our house for a barbecue on Sunday. There is probably nobody on my list that I would invite over for a barbecue on a Sunday night. Maybe one, maybe one. Everybody else, no, sorry. Uh, that's not going to work. And I think a lot of this, at least for me, breaks down to what did I think was like turning the trope of romance in a movie upside down. You know, what kind of subversive ideas can you come up with? And some of the ones that I came up with are, man, they pack a punch. So I can't wait to see what you got. My list is definitely spicy to say the least.
Mm, yes.
Okay.
And I just hope my list is falls squarely into the qualifications. That's
I'm
my hope.
sure I'm sure that it will. Even if it's not the kind of movie that I'm choosing, unconventional is a pretty wide and sweeping term that could encompass so many things. So I feel like you're probably going to be safe. And if you like the movie, that's half the battle.
Okay, then how about we get started?
Let's
Uh,
go.
who should start?
Well, I started last week, so you start this week.
All right. Some of my choices are going to be familiar, especially for those of you that have, listened to 1021 on a more regular basis. So I'm putting that out there right now. And my number 10 is Lal Singh Chera. Some of you might know it as the remake of Forrest Gump from
Hmm.
India. And yeah, that's exactly what it is. Except I have gone that route of saying, you know what, I think it's better, and it's not me trying to be some, you know, uh, I don't know, hipster guy that's like it's a foreign movie, so therefore it must be better. No, that's not what I'm going for at all. But when the story is as similar as it is, some might ask, why not just choose Forrest Gump? Well, because quite frankly, let's face it, the the love between Forrest and Jenny was very much one sided in a romantic way. In this particular film, it seems that the only thing that really wasn't working out between them was the timing. And that's one of the ways I think it improved over the actual original version. Um, the love that Lal has for Rupa is very much, you know, very in a very much similar vein to Forrest Gump. And I only keep making these comparisons because, you know, it's probably the film more people are familiar with. Um, Lal is invested heavily in his feelings for Rupa, and you could see that there's some reciprocation, but with as we're familiar with how the story goes, there's a lot of stuff just going on that the main character finds themselves kind of uh, caught up in, or it's all about these two people that have known each other forever, but the timing has just never been right until it is. Now, what I think makes that unconventional is I think it flies in the face of the conventional story of, boy meets girl, um, they fall in love, get married, and that maybe in the movie takes place over the span of a few days, a few weeks, but in situations like this where it actually takes years, decades for them to finally be able to do this, it makes me feel good knowing that, hey, every missed opportunity is not always a missed opportunity. Sometimes it's opportunity that needs a chance to ferment, and you just got to wait until the timing is right. So the idea that that person could still be out there no matter how long it's been, and that person could be the person you always thought it was, no matter how long it's been. Um, just on a personal note, makes me feel warm and glowy inside. That's why Lal Singh Chada is my number 10, and that's just for me an unconventional love story that makes me feel good.
Okay, that was kind of a good choice. Um, I don't know. I have not actually seen that version of the movie, so I'm just kind of in the dark on it. I mean, I know a bit about it, so that's always those kinds of romances are always difficult. They're difficult to quantify sometimes too. Um, okay, I'm gonna go with number 10 as The Lake House. Now, The Lake House is it's such a weird and interesting story. It's basically about a doctor who moves into this lake house, and she starts exchanging letters basically with the resident that lived there before. And it's there's a lot of things that happen in this movie that make you feel like the two of them are very connected, like through time. And it's I mean, I liked it. Um, the movie was okay. I guess I should say that the movie was okay. I love Sandra Bullock. I love Keanu Reeves. I felt like the two of them were absolutely wonderful in this film. But I didn't really love the story. But I did love the romance in the story, and it's extremely unconventional because obviously it takes place sort of out of time and out of sequence. So it makes it very interesting to try to piece everything together. There's like a little mystery that's involved in it, and um, and then you kind of discover some things that maybe begin to make everything sort of make sense. But it's it's kind of bittersweet too. It's unconventional, I guess, in the way that the romance is told from a storytelling perspective, and I feel like it definitely deserves a spot on the list because it's not told from the standard, boy meets girl with all of the social trappings. It's definitely a much more subdued and very um, interesting way of handling a romance. So The Lake House was released, I believe, I want to say it was like 2008. No, I guess it was 2006. So it was 2006. It stars Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock. And yeah, if you haven't seen it, I won't give anything away. It's definitely worth sort of watching it unwind. It's a nice Saturday afternoon movie to watch. Um, there's some sad parts, there's some happy parts. It all is very it reminds us all, I think, of the way that life is very interconnected, whether we realize it or not. We are very much connected to other people, maybe in ways that we didn't even realize. So number 10, The Lake House.
That is an excellent choice that I have not seen, but I will say that I'm aware of it, and that counts for something, right?
Yeah, it definitely borders on, like, it has a fantasy element to it.
Hmm.
And so, if you like those movies where there's kind of a very open-ended feeling of, hey, what possible things could be, without it being like, direct magic or, manipulating the world through the supernatural. I mean, it, like, obviously there's something going on, but I feel like this is like, fantasy light. So if you like those kinds of movies, you'll probably like this one.
Okay, I'm gonna add that to my watch list, and there we go. Add it.
Also, Keanu Reeves. I mean, just, yeah, Keanu Reeves.
It's funny because my number 9 also has Keanu Reeves.
Really
Yes,
getting some airplay.
it's not what you'd expect, though. My number 9 is the 2019 film "Always Be My Maybe."
Oh, that was good.
If you recall, Keanu Reeves had a small but crucial role in the film as the character he was born to play himself, and I love his extended cameo, I guess. Anyway, the the story itself is, it stars Randall Park and Ali Wong as Marcus and Sasha. They're, you know, much in the same vein of my number 10, childhood friends who have kind of grown apart over the years. One of them actually, goes on to great fame and notoriety, and the other is kind of still where he was in high school in a local band, um, just kind of hanging out with his dad. Oh, that sounds familiar.
Eh,
Anyway, the the story plays out that, again, much like my number 10, they'd known each other forever. They had crushes on each other back in the day. There was just unrequited, unspoken of um, things. And, well, eventually they realize that maybe there is something between them. But the problem isn't just, at one point they're seeing other people. At one point she's seeing, someone famous. It's mostly they have very different statures in life, right? They're in very much different places. He's just the everyman. Randall Park is the everyman that, he's somehow even less than that. He's every slob. He's, the guy that just, you know, what was that? Failure to launch. He's that guy. And she's hyper successful. So how do two people from, incredibly opposite ends of the, success in life spectrum, you know, merge well? That's where a lot of the conflict comes from. And the fact that this movie kind of came from nowhere. So when I watched it, it definitely helped make me realize just how good it is. It's very off kilter, and it tells this story between these two in a very fun and hilarious way. If you recall, when we did the battle of the movie bands, yeah, it was battle of the movie bands. I uh, specifically pointed at this movie for Hello Peril, his band in the movie, and the wonderful soundtrack that they added to the film, including a song called "I Punched Keanu Reeves," which, well, you have to hear it to love it, and you have to watch the movie to understand it. So always be my maybe. I thought I would get through it without making that slip, but uh, almost. Always be my maybe is my number nine.
Okay. I have not actually seen that movie, so sounds like a good one though. I
It's
will
a lot of fun.
definitely I will definitely watch out for it. My number 9 goes to a movie that I sometimes wonder, um how Pygmalion a story can get until you sort of get downright into, okay, I'm a writer. I'm just going to write myself a girlfriend, a boyfriend, a partner. Ruby Sparks from 2012 does exactly just that. The novelist's name is Calvin, and he writes a girlfriend, and somehow he writes her into existence. Um, it's pretty crazy how this whole thing happens, but I mean, at its core, it's a Pygmalion story, right? And he Calvin goes through a lot of sort of the ups and downs of a romance, except he keeps trying to write the character, his girlfriend, to be more and more attentive to him, what what he needs from her, and that kind of thing. And it goes very sideways in a lot of ways. And then Ruby, the character that is the woman, eventually she realizes, you know what, maybe there's more to life than this. So it's super interesting for all of the things that it brings up, but it's also such a bizarre love story, and one that is kind of heartbreaking because, I think it speaks to this idea that, if you've been alone long enough, then what you're looking for is sometimes out of reality's capability of providing. And so the only way that you can get what you need is by creating it yourself. And that's not how life works. And all of the lessons that come along in this movie sort of remind us that part of what makes romance romance is the uncertainty, the insecurity, the inevitability of certain things that if you're controlling everything, then that's not having a partner, that's not having a romance, that's something totally different. It was very interesting, very unique. I give the story a lot of credit. It was from 2012, and if you haven't seen this one is a really interesting one to watch. So Ruby Sparks.
That actually sounds pretty dang interesting.
It's super interesting. I mean, when I first saw it, I kept searching for, hey, who wrote this book? And I wasn't able to find the source material on it. But I thought, wow, that would be super meta if a writer was writing a writer who wrote his girlfriend into existence. But apparently, no, it was an original screenplay. So
And once again, I'm adding things to my watch list.
Your watch list is going to be huge at some point, Josh.
Yes, it's already a pretty good size, to be honest with you.
Ah,
But as long as I'm getting quality content and actually watching it eventually, I think it's okay.
well, good. I'm glad I can contribute in some small way.
In a big way, a lot of these are from you. Even not from this show. You recommend stuff. In case you guys out there didn't know, um, sometimes Jen and I talk without an audience,
It's true. We do.
and believe it or not, sometimes we talk about movies. And every once in a while, Jen will mention a film that I find interesting. I because you all know the way Jen talks about these movies. It's absolutely incredible. So I hear something that you hear about something she likes, and I'm like, that does sound amazing.
Well, I will say this. First of all, I watch a lot of movies, but I think I should like throw the caveat into that I also watch a lot of really bad movies because the law of probability is if you watch a lot of movies, they're not all going to be great. So when we curate these lists, I'm trying to come up with, the best of the list theme, not just something that goes along with a theme, but like, hey, this is what really works. So I think that's why sometimes they come across as being possibly better than they are, but hopefully you'll at least enjoy the reference.
Okay, I can dig that. I guess we're on to my number eight.
Number 8.
Number eight. I'm gonna get some backlash for this. I know it, not because
Uh-oh.
it's on my list, but because it's so low. But
Uh-oh.
I have to put it lower on my list because while yes, unconventional, it's also a tiny bit problematic. Um,
Oh, I have a lot of problematic movies on my list, so share away.
my number eight is 1997's Chasing Amy.
Oh, that was a good movie, actually.
Yeah, very good movie. I watch it at least once a year, and some people might take umbrage with the idea that you know it's supposed to be Alyssa's supposed to be a lesbian, and suddenly she's with a guy. Well, bisexual people exist. Sorry to break that news to you, but it happens. And yeah, it kind of would have been good to establish that early, but you know what? It is what it is, as they say. But getting on to the core of the movie itself, Holden is a comic book artist, and his partner slash roommate Banky is he's kind of a jerk. I think that's pretty safe to say. Holden meets Alyssa and becomes absolutely smitten immediately. The only thing is, she's into girls, but he doesn't give up trying. So he's trying to win her over, and she's just kind of like, I don't know. I don't know. Until eventually, you know, it happens. To which in the movie, there is some backlash against her friends who are a member of the community that are like, dude, he's a dude. And she's like, yeah, I get it. I know. But, like, I think this is definitely, especially for the time, late 90s, um, goes against the convention of just this the literally the straight boy meets girl, and crosses over into some territory that perhaps at the time really needed to be crossed over into, having this look at the other side, so to speak. It has quite the following. And of course, Kevin Smith, of course, he has quite the following. But this one strikes differently than his other movies. This one uh, hits less of an adolescent, kind of toilet humor um, aspect, and does sort of aim directly at the feels with two people that shouldn't be able to fall in love, but somehow manage to at least fall in deep like, and to know what happens to them. They follow it up with subsequent movies where they're not main characters, and pretty much exclusively just a cameo. But you do kind of get some closure to their story over the years in other Kevin Smith projects. Chasing Amy is about as unconventional as it gets, in my opinion, when it comes to a love story playing out, and that's why it's my number 8.
Nice. Okay, my number 8 is okay, this movie actually haunted me when I first saw it. I mean, haunted me like in a number of different ways. And I'm gonna also give you a little bit of information on something that happened recently with this movie. The movie is called Let the Right One In. Now, Let the Right One In is at the heart of this story is a romance between a vampire girl, a girl who is a vampire who looks like a young girl, and she and her father are hiding. There's a number of different reasons that they're hiding, but basically they're hiding. And the dad, as I would expect that anyone would sort of, think, is not only very protective, but also there's a lot of secrecy and, kind of rules about what you can and cannot do as a vampire child. Um, but this romance develops between the the girl and this boy who very I think very interestingly, um the development of it is something a little bit more than a standard, hey, here's, two kids that fall in love, and uh the nuances, I guess, around it are incredibly both difficult and endearing. They're endearing on a level that is just it's heartbreaking. Um and there there's a part of this movie has been remade. It was remade, I think, in like 2010 or somewhere right around there. And it worked, but it wasn't. The original had something special about it. The romance between the two of them was something that was not really overtly stated, but it was so obvious. It was so clear that there was genuine love between the two of them. And some of it has to do with like the boy sort of understanding that what she is and being able to accept it, being able to understand it, being able to navigate the world of something that is supernatural and not sort of feeling immediately like you are, in jeopardy, going to die, or, want to be afraid and run away. That's one thing, but this I think the second part of it is there is an amazing reciprocity between the two characters in terms of romance that is just beautiful to watch unfold. Um, I think also, if you do watch the original movie, watch it with subtitles and listen to the inflection that they're using, because the dubbed version to me is missing a lot of emotion. But even though, look, I don't speak a lot of different languages, when I hear the original language being spoken, you can really feel emotion as it was meant to be instead of a studio actor reading from a script. And I know that they try to get it right, but it doesn't quite work. So if you do watch the original, definitely watch it dubbed. So or subtitle, I should say, not dubbed, subtitled. Um, the other thing that I really love about this movie is we don't get to see a lot of movies where the genuine aspect of falling in love can happen without some supernatural regard, like something happens with a vampire and the blood, or something happens and the romance itself is built off of something that isn't necessarily real. And this feels very real. So as unconventional romances go, Let the Right One In has a big spot in my heart at my number 8 on my list. It was again from 2000. I think I just said it was 2006, right?
Yes.
So, yes.
Not to be confused with Let Me In.
No. That is a totally different story. Let the Right One In it's a reference to something that actually happens, um that you'll understand if you watch the show or if you read the book. But I did want to just mention that if you watch this movie and you like it, um Showtime, I think, or Cinemax, I can't remember which one, recently did a series for Let the Right One In. And I gotta say, I didn't think that it could work. And I don't know what the viewership was, so I don't know if they're going to continue on with it. But it was pretty amazing. It was really amazing. If you like that story, you'll love the series. Um, I was just blown away by it. Absolutely blown away by it. Really, really excellent.
Look at you giving out the follow-up material.
Yeah, yeah, it's Showtime. I found out it is Showtime. I think I do think that. Oh no, it is just definitely Showtime. You can get add-on subscriptions to watch it, but it's definitely you have to view it through Showtime.
Okay.
So there you go.
Well, my number 7 is quirky.
Quirky.
Yeah, it's quirky, and it's fun
I
for the
don't
whole
think I've seen
family.
that movie. Is that like a kin movie to Porky's or something, or no?
Yes.
Okay,
It's
just checking.
a follow-up to Porky's. And
Corky's.
it's fun for the whole family. No, my number 7 is 2001, 2001's Shrek.
Oh, I knew you were gonna pick Shrek. I knew it.
That has not one unconventional romance, but two.
Yes, indeed. Well, you have to go to Shrek 2, yeah?
What for the official, I guess, it's heavily hinted at the end that this is the case, right? Um, but it's about an ogre that falls in love with the princess. Fairy tale classics, fairy tale stories don't end with the ogre falling in love with the princess. No, no, the ogre eats children and smashes castles and things like that. But no, this one had the ogre fall in love with the princess, and of course, in the twist of all twists, it turns out that their true love, the form of their true love, was much more compatible than even they could have even imagined.
I don't know, Josh, this is sounding like a really layered story. Kind of like an onion.
Kind of. Ogres, they're like onions, which means stinky. Layers. You know you were going to get an awful Shrek impression at some point. But the what I love about this story, from taking your fairy tales, your classic fairy tales, the ones that Disney has shoved down our throats for years, and then just put like this really weird slant to them. It that drew me in immediately, and to find out that this was about a love story that isn't supposed to happen because, after all, Princess Fiona is supposed to be waiting for. Um, I guess in this particular instance, she's supposed to be waiting for Lord Farquaad, but he's like, "No, I can't do that. Find somebody to do that for me." And he should realize that's not how the fairy tales work. So, a movie that's filled with memorable lines, memorable moments, true love's first kiss, and waffles.
Moviesandmeals.com, just letting you know, has a recipe for parfait because everybody loves a good parfait.
Fair enough, and I'm glad you were able to work that in there.
I
But
mean, Shrek is one of those movies that everybody has a cultural reference to hop in on,
mhm.
because I feel like it's just permeated that far. Everybody knows a good Shrek quote
Do
and
you
can make
know
it
the Muffin
applicable.
Man?
Not my gumdrop buttons.
You monster!
I mean, everything about that movie is good. It's true.
And
Just the fact that his executioner is named Felonious is just. I mean, it's they spared no expense. They thought of everything. So yeah.
the if for some reason you haven't watched it, or if you haven't watched it in a long time, remember, always look at the background too, because
Always look at the background. Yes.
this is one of those movies that tells as much story in the background as it does, right up there in your face. Uh, and you'll be highly upset by some of it. Like, wait, what was that? Oh no!
Huh. Yeah. There's a lot going on. A lot.
So, three cheers for the brilliance of the people that made that movie, and that's why it's my number seven.
Awesome. Okay, I am going to lead off with my number seven, with a tale of two movies. Although it's the same movie, but it's a tale of two movies. This is the 2005, and everybody knows that I love Peter Jackson because he brought us The Lord of the Rings. But since there really isn't any romance, and I mean, nothing really unconventional, unless we're talking about, Gollum in the Ring. I had to choose something else. So I chose Peter Jackson's King Kong. And actually I didn't choose it because it was Peter Jackson. I just absolutely love it. King Kong with Jack Black from 2005 and Adrian Brody is one of those movies that's like, it almost feels like it goes just a little bit too far. Um until I think on Fay Ray. And if you don't know who Fay Ray is, I'm going to give you a quick crash course in Fay Ray. Okay. Fay Ray was born in 1907 and she lived until 2004. She was a Canadian American actress, and her best known role was for her 1933 version of Anne Darrow in King Kong. She became a kind of iconic film star that was known as like the premier, sort of before queens were a thing. She was a scream queen, and she was absolutely brilliant. um she was kind of a paradox. I mean, she was just this beautiful woman who had she was very smart, but the roles that she sometimes played were a little bit less than. Okay, so what does this have to do with an unconventional romance? Well, in the 1933 version of King Kong, let's just say that it's quite a bit toned down, or it didn't reach any huge level of sort of like intimate understanding between King Kong the creature and Darrow. But she's been, and uh, I'm sorry, Fay Ray has been uh, team termed. I keep wanting to say teamed up with, but she's been termed as King Kong's wife. So that should tell you, how much sort of is in there. But fast forward to 2005 when Peter Jackson remade King Kong, and we have a completely new Anne Darrow. And in this movie, Naomi Watts plays a terrified woman who meets this creature, and the amount of time that they spend together on the screen is fairly short. I mean, most of the time that we have on the screen is spent in, at least on Skull Island, it's the rescue, it's the, dangers of the other things that are there, the giant bugs, the, huge, just there's a lot of stuff on this island, and it's pretty bad. Everything is out to kill you. But the time that we have with Naomi Watts's character and King Kong, something very odd happens, and clearly this was very much by design. Okay, so it wasn't like, it was just an accident of filming. It is very clear that King Kong does not just fall in love with her, but that, like, he has this extremely sensual, almost feeling for her. And Naomi Watts, that character, Anne Darrow, really exchanges that same almost dripping sensuality with King Kong. And it I have to say that when I first saw it, I mean, it was a little bit noticeable, okay, yeah, haha, he falls in love with her. As I have watched this successively throughout the years, each time I watch it, I notice something different about their relationship. There's this ice scene when King Kong is actually in New York, that is about as tender as you could possibly get. Like, it's hard to imagine two heterosexual people together in a relationship doing something the way that those two did on screen and having it feel as intimate. It's almost like it felt more intimate on screen. I In terms of unconventional romances, obviously it's extremely unconventional, but I give this movie a lot of credit for not making it feel icky or gross or like, oh my god, that's so disgusting. There is something beautiful about that relationship between the two of them that is just sort of epic. It is the story of Beauty and the Beast in a way that is so wonderfully told. And of course, at the end, she's willing to try to, stand in front or be in front of the guns that are trying to kill King Kong. And Kong, gently puts her down and realizes that, it's self-sacrifice. And that also is just like, it's harrowingly sad, but it's wonderfully portrayed. So, number 7 for me, King Kong, with Jack Black, Adrian Brody, and Naomi Watts, 2005. Really, really wonderful film. Absolutely awesome unconventional romance going on there.
Okay. Surprised you went with the updated one. It's the official entry.
Peter Jackson, Andy Serkis is in this one as well. Naomi Watts. I think partly the thing is Naomi Watts sells this for me. Naomi Watts creates the unconventional romance in a way that none of her predecessors have, and that's why I brought up Fay Ray. I brought her up because I see her as being the original sort of, this is the King Kong story. But flash forward to 2005, and all of a sudden the romance between the two of them is like kicked up to high heat. And I don't think that I have ever seen that before in a way that didn't feel like either totally ridiculous or just really creepy and gross. This was so well done. So that's why it gets my spot on the list.
Okay. Excellent choice.
So we're at number 6. Oh god, my number 6. You
I
you
was
might
about to say the same.
you might need to take some tums for this one. We'll see.
I'll keep that in mind. But we will hit mine first. Mine number 6, one that some people might not have expected me to add to the list, but you know what? As a book, I enjoyed it. As a movie, I also enjoyed it, and that's cool. There we go. No big build up, but I will say my number 6 is. Are you ready for this?
I'm ready.
Okay, it's Warm Bodies.
Oh, that almost made my list. That was such a good movie.
I am not the person that's like, you know what? We should throw zombies on here. Not usually who I am. But this particular story not only fits nice and neatly into the box that is our topic, but it's also a very enjoyable movie. Now,
Mhm.
for those of you that don't know, it basically asks the question, what happens when a zombie falls in love? You would think that would be interesting enough. But what if that person that the zombie falls in love with has something that the zombie doesn't, which is a pulse? There's there's a lot of there's a lot of heart to go around in this movie. Um, it doesn't
Not
take
as much as the zombies wanted, though.
it doesn't take a lot of brains to fall in love,
Yeah.
but in this particular instance, it helps for reasons that I won't go into. Anyway, so yes, this is the story of a zombie teenager that falls in love with a girl, and they do have some uh, interesting difficulties. Like, you know, she's Protestant and he's a zombie, or her friends, think his life is going nowhere, and his friends want to kill and eat her. You know how it is.
Normal drama. Yeah.
Mhm. But the fact that these two cemetery crossed lovers are adamant about making this work. Okay, enough of the puns. Just she sees clearly signs in him that something is changing with the zombies, and because he's able to have feelings, that's an absolute game changer for the survivors of this zombie apocalypse. Although it is the zombie apocalypse, and if you're familiar with the genre, it is very much a shoot first and never ask questions kind of scenario. So she has to figure out how to break the news to everybody without getting him killed, and he has to figure out how to keep her around, well, without the same thing happening to her. So as these two individuals um, work out the issues that keep them sort of separated, uh, very much in a Romeo and Juliet way, except one of them's already dead. You get taken on this ride about what true love actually is, and what it could actually be between two beings that instantly feel. I probably put the wrong emphasis on that last word. I should have just said instantly feel. Yeah, because when you're dead, feelings, whether physical or emotional, are hard to come by. And warm bodies makes you feel like no matter how dead you feel, I say feel a lot. No matter how dead you relate to, no, that doesn't work. No matter how dead you are inside, screw it. No matter how dead you feel, I'm just going to go back to that. Um, there could always be someone out there that uh, warms you up, or dare I say, warms your body in a um, not so much physical sense, but emotional sense. And that's why it's my number six.
Nice. It was a good choice. Like I said, it almost made my list too, but I had so many others that it just kind of got crowded out. So, but good. I'm glad you put it on your list.
Thank you.
Okay, my number six. I have to say that this movie actually made me a bit sick when I watched it. Although of course that did not stop me from watching it because, like all good, terrible, yeah, horror slash science fiction movies, I was fascinated by it too. So didn't let a little bit of super ick bother me. No, no, no. Uh, this movie, I don't know if you've seen it, so bear with me here. The movie is called Splice. Do you know what that movie is? Have you ever seen that movie, Josh?
I have not seen it, but I know of it.
Splice is from 2009. It's basically the genre that it's labeled as sci-fi horror. I would lean more in the direction of sci-fi, but the horror that happens is pretty bad. Um, so they make this new being. Okay. And they have no idea what they're doing, really. I mean, they're scientists, they're splicing genes and sequencing and trying to come up with a species that will be viable. And they have a lot of failures at first. And then they finally have a success. And the success is an interesting one because they introduce human DNA to it, so it has human constructs, but it isn't necessarily human. Um, they name I'm getting a little bit too far ahead, but I'll guess I'll just say they give her the name Dren. So she is like personal, it's not just, lab project 3254 or anything like that. There's a real person underneath there, at least in terms of how they interact with Dren. And at first it's very calculating, then it's very familial, maternal and paternal, and then something crazy happens. Dren develops the ability to Dren basically is going through puberty. I guess that's the best way to say it, and develops the ability to secrete some kind of pheromone that makes her incredibly attractive to one of the science partners. And he has sex with her, and now really crazy stuff happens after that. Um, it is in no small way the hypothetical story of what happens when you can't control your own creations. So it's a little bit like taking Frankenstein, ratcheting it up by about, 13 or 14 degrees of science, and then also adding in the truly horrible and very difficult to sort of extract what is right, or the morality of what is happening here. Um, the other doctor, the two doctors that are working on this are actually married, and the doctor that is the woman, who I want to say her name is Elsa, I think it was Elsa, she decides that they should kill Dren. And of course Dren realizes what's going on and goes into self-protection mode, and I mean, a lot of crazy things happen. In terms of it being an unconventional romance, obviously it's a little bit, convoluted because there's the pheromones, but there is something that happens before that which does sort of feel like it's so gross, it's so icky, but it's such a human thing that I feel like, "Oh, okay, yep, this is exactly what human beings sort of do." And I have to say that, I've heard a lot of people, especially on it or in different blogs and on different podcasts, talk about this movie. And one of the things that I have continually sort of gotten from people is that would never happen. Humans are too smart to mate with species that are outside of their own. And I'm like, listen, yeah, exactly. Thank you for laughing because that's exactly the way I think about it too. And and also, I would just like to, if you'd like to remove yourself from the situation and just like blame our ancestors, the whole reason that we are who we are is because basically our line had sex with Neanderthals. That's why 23andMe has Neanderthal DNA. It's not because, oh, that's some weird offshoot of being Homo sapien. No, they were a totally different origin. Anyway, it just, sometimes these things make me truly laugh just like that because, yes, this is exactly what would happen. But in terms of the actual romance part of it and why it's like so unconventional, obviously, you know, yeah, there's some moral lines being crossed. There's some pretty interesting and way out there science fiction ideas that come up that get churned up because of this. And I love when we have to examine what it is that makes us think we are attractive to another person without knowing anything about them. Without having any, because they didn't, I mean, as much as they watched this being grow from basically being in a lab, they really had no idea what they were dealing with. So it's very interesting to me. Anyway, number 6 is Splice, and it was released in 2009. And if you have not seen this movie, um be gentle with yourself. It, like I said, it's high stakes and it's very icky in parts, so be warned, be warned.
Okay. Okay, that's an interesting choice. That's yeah. People should realize that when it comes to humans, males especially, uh, they have no qualms about just sticking it in pretty much anything.
Right? I mean, this, like, it actually makes me laugh to hear people say, "Oh no, human beings are just way too smart to have like romances." And I'm over here going, "You know what? The next big thing in tech is creating artificial robots that are basically supposed to be they're supposed to take the role of your partner." So don't come at me with all of this, oh yeah, human beings are so smart that we would never do that. Um no. No, no, no.
There's a reason that you know. Well, I'll put this as delicately as I can. When the blood rushes, it comes from somewhere, and it's usually the brain.
It turns off all like normal. Oh yeah, maybe this is not the best idea, which honestly is what happens in Splice. I mean, clearly I think there's not just a morality, a sort of thing happening here. There's something else. There is something on a very primal level that happens, but I'll let you, the viewer, sort of make your own determination about where the morality is or isn't in this movie. It doesn't end happy, so you can, it take that with that, take what you'd like. It doesn't end happy.
I'm sorry, I've been moving around the microphone a bit as I get comfy. Breaking into the top five.
Yeah, this actually Splice actually ties in perfectly with my number five because my number five is just about as terrible as Splice. So can't wait to get there. Really excited to be in these little middle parts where everything is terrible. Yeah,
Well,
super
speaking of
awesome.
terrible, uh, I'm not saying my number five is terrible. I enjoy it quite a bit, but one of the stars people tend to think is pretty terrible. His name's Andy Samberg,
Hmm. Yeah, he's got a reputation, doesn't he?
and he made a movie called Palm Springs. Now, if you're not familiar with Palm Springs, it's your run of the mill time loop movie where he's living the same day over and over again. Except here's the thing, he's at a wedding.
Hmm.
Now, instantly, your mind hears time loop, and you're like, well, it's Groundhog Day. And yeah, I could have went with Groundhog Day. Why not? Or I could have went with another uh, time loop movie that involves pretty much the same thing. Map of tiny little things, map of tiny perfect little things, something like that.
Hmm.
Um, hold on, actually, I do have it. The map of tiny perfect things. That's another one I could have gone with, where it's all pretty much time loop. Woo the girl until she can, where you can make somebody fall in love with you in a day, right? That's essentially what a lot of these movies are saying. I went with this one because the difference is she's in the time loop too, and they have different ideas of what to do about it. She joins later in the process through some. I mean, let's face it, he's just kind of doing his thing, and one of the instances sort of brings her to where he was doing his thing, and she kind of gets caught up in it too. So now she's in the time loop, and they have different thoughts on how to escape. His is why. Essentially, we're immortal. We can do whatever we want. He talks about um, everybody that he's slept with at the wedding party. And he's like, he's been doing it so long, he wasn't really discriminatory about who it would be. Sometimes it was just a challenge to see if he could. You know, you're doing the same thing over and over and over again. Why not? And she's more along the lines, if we have this infinite time to, better ourselves and try to figure out what to do with this situation. And the another, it's it's like this, I think. Maybe it's a sort of a parable to marriage, together forever, because these two people are almost literally together forever, and being the only ones in this situation, it makes sense for them to sort of almost reluctantly gravitate towards each other. And it's not him trying to make her fall in love with him, in a day, because they are spending day after day after day with each other. And pretty soon, well, eventually you're going to get tired of that person, right? But again, they're the only one that knows the situation you're in. So it's a lot of love, it's a lot of hate, it's a lot of those feelings in between that you share with someone, just from having to be forced into proximity for eventually or essentially an eternity. So even though this is, as I stated at the start, just a silly time loop movie, it does go into a lot of different layers of the emotions two people can share and maybe eventually use to build an actual long-lasting love. That's, I think, what a romance, no matter whether it's conventional or not, is about. And the fact that these two do it stuck together uh, makes it my number five.
Very good choice. Very good choice. Okay, my number five film is a movie that is consistently in all of my books that have top 500 films of the 20th, 21st century. 501, most or best films of the past 50 years. Um, uh, Siskel and Ebert's, best compendium book of movies. Um, and it's this movie, let's see if I can couch this the right way. So, the film itself was created by Korean by a Korean film company. Um, and one of the things about Korean cinematography, Korean filmmaking in general, Korean films in general, but cinematography and writing together, is that they excel when it comes to putting together a movie where you cannot, in any way, shape, or form, tell what is going to happen. Um, in the West, we are big fans, and I do mean big fans, of not just dumbing down, and I'm saying this lovingly, our plots, but also creating enough foreshadowing and hints about what is to come that the audience isn't truly surprised by the time that it comes to the final act. Because if you are totally surprised, then audiences in the West feel very upset that they were misled. It's a very different form of storytelling. Um, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, but standardly in the West, you know, uh, we have a first act, we have a second act, we have a third act, we have a beginning, a rise to action, a climax, maybe a soft sort of resolve, and then something crazy that happens out of the soft resolve, and then the final resolve of your film. But it's a fairly standard, I guess, formula that is applied on a variation over and over and over again. And that's just the way that we make movies. Okay. Korean cinema does not do that. Korean cinema has almost an excruciatingly difficult, well, difficult for us in the West, uh, way of telling the story that runs in so many different aspects. There's so many ways that you can go with whatever it is that you're seeing, but you're being led to believe that, this is all leading to something. But what the something is generally, especially when they do horror, not what you ever intended. And you just could never have thought that this is not in your wildest dreams. Well, okay, maybe your wildest dreams, but probably not if you were a sane minded person. This isn't the direction you would jump in. I can already hear people going, I'm not sane minded. I totally would have guessed it. Okay. Uh, so the movie is called Old Boy. Now, this is one of the few movies that I have ever seen that I had to go do something completely, like, how they say touch grass. I needed to go for a walk in a park after I watched this movie because I was so disturbed by it, but it was amazing, truly amazing. Okay, so here's why it makes my list for unconventional romance. The protagonist of this story is set free from a prison, and the bulk of this movie is him getting revenge on the people who imprisoned him. And basically the way that it works is you can imprison someone for money. So if somebody gives you enough money, you can go grab somebody and imprison them. And he figures out who the people were that imprisoned him, or he thinks that he figures it out. He goes on this very long sort of revenge tour where some pretty bad things happen. And along the way, he befriends this woman who he doesn't know who she is at all, but they fall in love. They, they get closer and closer, and there is a sense of familiarity between the two of them. But it's hard to figure out exactly what that is. It just, there's something that feels right about the two of them being in the same scene together, but you can never quite figure out why. Well, it turns out after he has fallen in love with her completely, after, basically everything that should happen in a romance happens in a romance, the people who are looking to torment him let him know that that is the daughter that he had before he went to prison, that he understood was adopted. So he gave up all hope of finding her. The very end of this movie, without, I mean, it's spoilery, but this is an older movie, so is involves the cutting out of a tongue so that no one could speak of this again. It I mean, okay, first of all, unconventional romance, yes, that box is ticked, but the the grander part of this story is that it is a romance developed with the intention of it being a revenge story within his story. And that in and of itself is sort of mind blowing and so perfectly executed in this film that it definitely deserves all the accolades that it gets. This is another movie that has been redone. I do not suggest watching the remake until you have seen the original Korean version. And again, watch it with subtitles. Listen to the utter devastation that these characters experience as a result of just the massive amounts of betrayal, heartbreak, uh, as the mystery begins to come undone so that you can understand what's happening, it gets more and more complex instead of, oh, okay, now we've cleared everything up. I mean, it is the worst kind of revenge film that there is because it is so incredibly personal. So Old Boy gets my number 5 spot. Really glad I got to include that on the list. It is definitely one of those films that if you haven't seen it, it makes everybody's list of must see movies of, the past 50, 75 years because it is just that good.
I have started it a couple times, have not been able to watch it all, but it is one of those movies that has been on my watch list forever, and I'm just waiting for the day to be able to just take it off
It,
after
it's
seeing it, of course.
it's a tough one too. It's a tough. This movie is very hard to watch. It does not sit well with you. It, like be prepared to switch tracks. Do something different. Have somebody to talk about it with because I'm telling you, it really is a deeply impactful movie.
Okay, sounds like I have to be in a very specific frame of mind to
Yes,
sit down and watch it.
bring cookies and ice cream. That definitely will soften the blow a little bit.
Okay.
So we're at number 4, and I'm sorry that that one took so long, but that actually is like it's one of those films that I've been like hoping I could get onto a list for a long time. It just so happened to fit perfectly here.
Well, it's too bad because next week's list is all about movies with the name boy in the title.
Revenge films. Oh, damn it.
I guess that would have been a more clever use of the joke. No, that's not next week's list. I do have a nail biter for next week, but we'll get to that later. Right now, we're at my number four,
Number 4.
and you mentioned a little story called Pygmalion.
Indeed.
Well, I have one that follows that same idea. I know that really narrows it down, right?
Yeah, because, there's only been like a couple of Pygmalion stories through the ages, right?
Like
Yeah.
a handful at most, right? Well, mine is a 2007 film starring Ryan Gosling. I'm talking about Lars and the Real Girl.
That also almost made my list. That's a good movie. That's a really good movie.
It is, especially when it comes to updating things like, hey, this guy's gonna fall in love with a sex doll, and you know what? Everybody in town's gonna be on board with it.
Huh.
That's really the cut and dry of the whole thing. Lars is a lonely guy. He orders a girlfriend and treats her like a real person. And everybody says, you know what? Let's just roll with it. Starts off with his family. They're like, oh, hey, yeah, yeah, oh yeah. She's a lovely girlfriend, Lars. He's losing his mind. But next thing you know, like I said, everybody in town's like, oh, they're a great couple. They're awesome. And the whole thing is Lars is coping with a lot of past issues when it comes to um, personal tragedies, and has a hard time kind of mixing with the real world. But when he gets his girlfriend, he suddenly finds it easier to be social. He finds it easier to kind of make his way out into the world because he doesn't feel like he's alone anymore. And I don't know about you, Jen, but I've certainly felt that before, and I know what it's like to have sort of a boost of confidence when you're not alone, when you have a a focus for that kind of energy in your life, even if it's not exactly reciprocated in that way. Just the idea that you have somewhere to put this energy, to put this love that you have just steeping inside of you, that for however long has nowhere to go. It suddenly you do, and you become more alive. You become more able, more capable. So I absolutely understand the idea of why Lars would just find himself more confident, even from his Amazon wife. And I should have thought of a better way to describe that.
It the just interjecting real quick. One of the things that I think that makes this movie, and again, I'm so sorry that it didn't make my list too because it is great. One of the things that I think we give children a lot of latitude with, and then we just sort of pull it back as we become adults for many different reasons, but the need is still there. I think is we allow kids a lot of latitude when it comes to putting things, creating attention in ways that we wouldn't normally do. Like, you have a favorite stuffed animal, you have an imaginary friend, you have something that sort of gives you that confidence that you need in order to succeed, moving or transitioning from being a child to being an adult. And sometimes I think that we forget that as adults, and that's what I feel like this movie does really well. As adults, we also have a lot of transitions. We also have a lot of interesting sort of focal points in our lives when things phase and unphase for us. You know, they go in and out of proper perspective. And the whole point was, just like a Pinocchio, just like a Velveteen Rabbit, just like a whatever. This is the point. The point is that there is something real about the experience, the whether what we're manifesting is the real thing or not. The experience is real, and that's what I think that movie did so well.
Imagination.
It was really well done. It was very clever and very well done.
Yeah, that's I completely agree, and that's why it's my number four.
Good. Okay, my number four is, oh boy, I'm just gonna ask you straight up. Have you seen any of the Chucky movies?
I've seen Bride of Chucky.
Okay, well, interestingly enough, number four is The Bride of Chucky.
Oh,
So the two characters in this are Chucky and Tiffany Ray. Now, they have. Oh, this is crazy. This whole plot is so bonkers, is so absolutely off the rails, that it feels like it shouldn't even be put pen to paper, but it's so good. I have an enormous love for the Chucky series, and the Chucky series pulls directly from this line right here, Bride of Chucky. Now, the unconventional relationship in this obviously is, hey, there is a possessed doll with another possessed doll that want to have children, but can't have children because they need a real person. And so they kidnap an actress, and they basically put the actress in a position to not be able to say no to everything. And it's I mean, it's creepy and it's icky and it's crazy, but there's something so compellingly weird about the romance between Chucky and Tiffany, dolls on the screen both possessed, that just is, it's indescribable. um Clearly there's massive amounts of dysfunction going on, but there's also sort of these core human processes and aspects of watching them behave the way that they do. You know, oh, just two psychopaths being psychopaths, but there's really a lot more going on. I- in terms of being an unconventional romance, I just can't think of sort of a more iconic place to put unconventional romance than with Chucky and Tiffany, and letting that sort of play out on its own. I don't think you could watch this movie and not believe that the two of them somehow shared, you know, feelings for each other. Their wants and desires are very much the same as human beings, but it's surreal to watch these dolls acting this out. It's just absolutely crazy. So it gets my number four pick, uh, both for being incredibly crazy and surreal, but also for giving us just the most unconventional romance that I can think of, that that really sort of pushes the boundaries. So that is my number four choice.
and it's one that I've seen.
I think
I'm
that's
so cool.
is that the first one on my list that you've seen?
I think so.
Oh my god, that's crazy. As we move up the list, I'm pretty sure you'll have seen the rest of these. So, oh no, actually, you've seen two of these, not the my number 2 I can almost guarantee you didn't see.
Well, I can guarantee you've probably seen the rest of my list, and I wouldn't be surprised if one of them was on yours.
All right, what is it?
Well, my number three, much in the same vein of Lars and the Real Girl, is Her.
See, that's another one that almost made my list. It would have made my list if first of all, if I hadn't had the ones on my list that I did, but secondly, I feel like it would have made my list if I liked the romance more. And it pains me to think that I didn't like it as much as I could have. But it was such a good movie. And oh my gosh, you know what? Before you even say anything about this movie, hats off to both of them for being able to act in the disembodied way that they were, because this movie really required some acting chops to get emotion through, and it did. I mean, I cried during this movie. So,
It's definitely a ride for sure. Um, there's a simplistic way to describe it. Man falls in love with his phone, right? But there's a bit more to it than that. He sort of how do you go about this? The story, like it is very simple. An AI is created to be your um, superior assistant, right?
your
And
companion in everything.
yes, the AI is learning about you. It is interacting with you, and ultimately becomes a big part of your life by design. And there's there's people out there that take that relationship and move it to sort of another level where you're developing feelings for this program. But I think what this does differently is it also asks the question, what if those feelings are reciprocated?
Right. That was the big thing for me.
What happens when the machine falls in love back? And this really weird relationship forms that takes all sorts of weird twists, um, and makes you kind of take a step back and think about what is real. Does the simple fact that the thing that you're developing feelings for, that it doesn't have a physical body, it doesn't have a um, anything except a voice and what appears to be the ability to learn, to function, to be almost self-aware, um, in a way. Does that make it any less valid? And I would say, watching this, you see that he's definitely developed these feelings. I keep wanting to find a better word, but and here's the sort of the crushing part, in my opinion. It does sort of have a bit of a commentary about what exactly somebody would be looking for in a partner if you know they're falling for someone that basically is something you own. You know, does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the emotional aspect of this sort of it dives into uncharted territory because and this is what I was talking about before when I was saying that we don't always understand what it is that creates attraction for us, and I think one of the biggest problems that we have, and I'm going to address this in one of my movies moving forward, but one of the biggest problems that we have in addressing this is truly understanding what sentience is.
Mhm.
And how do we address what it is to be sentient? And so because does that make reciprocating love a possibility, or is that just something that is a human construct that we're just attached to because that's just the only way that we can see it? And this movie really does bring up a lot of interesting points, and by the end you sort of you get to the point where at the end you realize that the AI has basically outgrown the relationship that she had and is moving on to find a more exciting relationship. And that's not always necessarily a bad thing. It's not that she doesn't still really care for him. It's that all of a sudden his needs were almost too small for her. She needed something bigger, more of a challenge. And that also brings up all of these super interesting points because when something is sort of self aware, does that necessarily mean that then it's still going to be beholden to the people that created it, or does it mean that it will go off and learn on its own because that's what we would do? And these answers and questions are really difficult, and in terms of the emotional entanglement that the two of them have is kind of cool. It was kind of cool to watch that unfold, because it did really feel like you were watching two people fall in love and then
Yeah,
basically fall out of love, which was also super. I mean, it was just really neat.
I think the end was uh, absolutely the most interesting part when you realize that, like you said, falling in and out of love, the the AI in this situation kind of left its parameters of being attached to solely him.
Right.
And in a lot of ways, that is a more human relationship than a lot of real human relationships I can think of, to where
Yes.
sometimes one person doesn't realize that they have that capability, even though, I mean, comparing the AI to the human is the one that should be able to recognize when something's not working more than an AI that's definitely programmed to ignore that and keep doing their job. Um, but it seems like sometimes people are more programmed than the computers that are represented.
Well, right, and I mean, I definitely got the feeling watching this movie that there was something about emotional intelligence involved here, and that the emotional intelligence that was being portrayed is it wasn't that oh humans that human was emotionally immature. It was that in comparison to the AI, it was emotionally immature. So human to human, it's not emotionally immature, but compared to the AI was just learning on a level that human beings simply cannot.
And I would say that that's more of a real relationship than some people will ever see in their lifetimes with a person.
I also was very fascinated by this movie. The questions and the conundrums that were raised by it did feel very in just very intrinsically human to try to tackle. So good
Hmm.
choice. Very, very good choice.
And I just want to throw in at the end and to kind of mimic your point, or at least reemphasize. Yes, to fall in love is human, and to grow attachments to, you know, people or whatever is a thing we do. And I would say that I completely forgot what I was going to say. Son of a biscuit. But it was going to be profound. Something about humanity and oh oh no, I had it more clear in my head. But what it essentially boils down to is yes, we've seen a lot of stories, especially tonight, about um, people and things that have uh, fallen in love, have developed relationships, and have grown together as beings. But the thing that makes her different is even though it's a beautiful thing to tell a love story, sometimes it's also a beautiful thing to show anybody that is, as you put it, emotionally intelligent enough to get out.
Right, right. Yeah, and I think that the exit, the off ramp in this movie is just as profound as the on ramp in this movie. So it definitely tells a spectrum of a story, which is kind of cool.
Yes, that's why it's my number three.
Okay. My number three is a movie that it may feel like it's conventional, but honestly, with the twists and the turns, this to me is kind of like uh, this to me is kind of like the what's a good? It's kind of like the glass onion of romance stories. When I first saw this movie, I don't know what I really thought of it. I I think I was kind of confused by what it is that they were trying to say. Um, I wanted to think about it one way, and yet I was so incredibly mesmerized by everybody's performance in this movie that I found it very difficult, and I had to go back and watch it a number of times. Um, it's called Dangerous Liaisons. Um, now, and just by way of more information, again, this is another movie that actually got a one season. They canceled it. They renewed it and then they canceled it. It's so crazy. But it got a very limited one season TV series spin-off where they sort of changed things up a little bit. But the actual season that is there that has been released is actually really good. It's a really crazy good story. Okay, but the movie Dangerous Liaisons stars Glenn Close, who was absolutely amazing, um, and John Malkovich, who is always amazing, Michelle Pfeiffer, Uma Thurman, Keanu Reeves, uh, an all-star cast. And when you see Keanu Reeves in the story, because see, he made the list again. Um, it's baby Keanu Reeves. I mean, like he's such a little boy in this. It's crazy. He's so cute. John Malkovich is handsome to a T. I mean, he really cuts a figure in this movie. And Glenn Close is absolutely stunning on both sides of sort of the movie spectrum, from being the mastermind to being just completely devastated by what has happened in the movie. Now, from the unconventional romance standpoint, the reason this is unconventional is because it's basically a a romance quadrangle. I don't even know if I could say it's a quadrangle. I feel like it's a romance map of many different intersecting points, and all of these sort of, if you do this, this will happen, but if I do this, then this will happen. This thing will affect this person, but this person will affect this person. I mean, it's a tangled mess. And it's glorious, just absolutely glorious. Let me talk just slightly, let me talk just a little bit about why I think the actual romance aspects of this are so well done. The idea that the Glenn Close's character, the uh, the Marquis, she sets the John Malkovich character, who is the Vicomte. She sets him a task, and the task is basically to seduce the young to be bride of her, Glenn Close's character's, um, rival, somebody that she, wants to see fail. And so the reason that she sets him the task is because he wants to get back together with her, but she makes these really difficult puzzles, challenges for him to have to do. And one of the other ones is to win the affection of um, Michelle Pfeiffer. And Michelle Pfeiffer is a character on the absolute edge of despair. It's there's so much about this movie that's like, there's machinations, there's um really awful manipulation happening, there's really terrible things being done in terrible situations. It's just, I mean, there's crazy stuff, but everything that happens in this movie is basically about the underlying effort for John Malkovich's character to become reconciled with Glenn Close's character. Now, Glenn Close apparently, I mean, the Marquis has absolutely no intention of getting back together. So all of these tasks and tests that she's setting forth are really, and he starts to realize it later, they're really not going to go anywhere. And at that point, when he gives up, that's when everything starts to sort of fall into place and fall apart at the same time. It's so well done. The costumes are absolutely gorgeous. The sets are breathtaking. There is nothing about this film that feels like it is not important historically, even though it's really not. But it feels that way because of the grandeur of it. Even the way that they speak is absolutely just well scripted down to every single last sentence. This movie was released in 1988. It it's still, it holds such an interesting place in my head, I think, because honestly, I feel like this was the first time I ever saw a movie that sort of upended the normal idea that I had about, okay, boy meets girl, they fall in love, something happens, this was so, there was so many twists and turns in it that it made it feel like it was, wow, this is so, there's something special about this. So that's my number three choice, Dangerous Liaisons from 1988.
Got a great cast. Should be worth checking out.
X. Did you not see Dangerous Liaisons?
No, I have not seen. I have not seen Dangerous
Wow.
Liaisons.
Okay, that is definitely, you can put that one at the top of your watch list because that even has all kinds of cultural uh icon references. Well, not a cultural icon cultural references though. There are things in the zeitgeist that definitely reference back to Dangerous Liaisons pretty continually. And I feel like Dangerous Liaisons also sort of set a trope standard, which a lot of other movies try to catch up with. And sometimes they succeed, but this movie was the first one to really do it well.
All right, let's see. Added to the watch list, but not available to stream anywhere yet.
Yeah, I'm sad about that.
For those of you unaware, I have an account on Letterboxd. Give me money. And what I do is I add these.
Oh, actually, Josh, you can see it on Pluto TV. I just looked.
Can you?
Yep, Pluto TV.
Does it not have Pluto on my list of services? Huh. I thought it did. You know what? Never mind that. Pluto TV. Okay. Okay. But I add it to my watch list, and when it becomes available, generally it'll give me a notification saying, "Hey, this movie you want to watch? It's available on such and such service." And that way, I'm able to check it out. So yes, whew, we're really bringing this one home, aren't we?
The last two on this list for me are two of the most emotional movies that I can remember, other than Marley and Me, which does not have unconventional romance except the dog and his food, um, that I can think of. So yeah, this was a good list.
Well, hopefully my list is meeting expectations. But the only way to figure out if it ultimately will is to finish it. And to do that, we got to talk about number two. My number two. Okay, this is a movie that completely caught me off guard. Had no idea what it was when I started watching it. All I know is that it has Colin Farrell. Yeah, let's check this out. And to say I was blown away would be an understatement because, like I said, it was a complete surprise. I had no clue what was going on when I pressed play, and that is 2015's The Lobster.
Oh,
It's funny because a lot of the movie is not about finding the right one. Essentially, David, Colin Farrell's character, uh, his wife leaves him. So he goes to this hotel. You have 45 days to meet and essentially fall in love. And that sounds like the premise for an interesting, maybe not interesting, but for a standard run of the mill rom com, right? You've got 45 days, fall in love, and keep it lighthearted and jaunty. But no, if you don't meet somebody and fall in love in that 45 days, you get turned into an animal of your choice. It so happens that he wants to be a lobster. So the idea as you're, a single person in this world at this hotel to meet somebody who, by the way, they say if you have common ailments, that's a great way to, say you're compatible, right? Uh, sure, I guess, but it's after a while, as time goes on and the pressure starts setting in, the pressure of, being turned into an animal, you suddenly get less picky and, and suddenly you're just wanting to be with somebody, to be with anybody, because I don't really want to be a lobster. I don't know why I went with that voice, but here we are. So you wind up with people that aren't right for you just for the sake of being someone that still gets to be human. And to me, that of course parallels a lot of desperate, lonely people that are willing to be with anybody, even if they're completely wrong for them, even if they're completely terrible people, just for the sake of being with somebody. And of course, that is not the way to get to happiness. Just on the flip side, the not quite heroes of the story, because in this world, this weird, strange world where you have to be paired up, the idea of being forced to be in a coupling is a bit of it's weird, it's odd, and it's forceful in a way that we today find very unwanted. Because after all, if there's anything we know of here today, it's we should have the ability to make choices of what to do with our lives. And so to say that the people that, because there is a sort of another side of the coin, is there's a group of single people kind of out in the wild, um, that are, are trying to smash the system, destroy the system, and sort of the rebel group, if you will. They are against this romantic empire. It's so weird, Star Wars references. Anyway, and there's a lot of that interplay in there. So as David, gets closer, and he winds up being paired with people that really don't have his best interests in heart, and he meets people that, um, or meets a person that he does happen to be quite fond of, and he's running out of time, so he has to figure out how to, you know, really, at this point, not become a lobster. The story takes it to a lot of strange places, and I'm really trying not to give away the entire plot here. So I will say this: there is a romance story in here, but the vast majority of it is not anti-romance, but I would say it falls into the lines of more choice and less uh, words. It's really speaking out against the idea that you have to be with somebody to be happy. But if you do find somebody, you should figure out what you have to do to sort of make it happen. And whatever system is in place that tries to define the rules of love are completely irrelevant to how you're feeling and how this other person's feeling. And at the end of the day, there's only one person you really have the power to make happy, and that's yourself. So you should probably try to do that. My number two is the lobster for those reasons.
It's an interesting choice. It's a Yeah, that's a very interesting choice. It definitely, I guess, fits unconventional. That's for sure. Yeah,
Hmm.
for sure. Okay, my number two is a movie that was released in 2013. I can almost guarantee that hardly anybody has seen it, unless, of course, you live in India, in which case you very well may have seen this movie. It did win an award in Britain for being the best foreign language film. And I had the joy of watching this movie. It is incredibly well thought out and directed. It's very well played. There's clearly there's a lot of language issues. Um, Again, I definitely suggest that you don't watch this movie dubbed. I haven't even seen a dub of this movie. I've only ever seen it in subtitles. And even then, there are clearly issues with translations. So, be patient with it and, try to use contextual clues as you need to. The movie was released in 2013. It's called The Lunchbox. The Lunchbox is it sort of tells the story of two people who are on sort of, I want to say, like the opposite ends of the spectrum in terms of why they're lonely. One person is he's getting ready to retire from his job and he's just been alone for a long time. The other person is in a loveless marriage, or at least a marriage that she does not feel that she's getting attention at all through. And she tries to rekindle the romance with her husband by writing letters and putting them into his lunchbox. Now, the lunchbox is delivered by a service which in the US and the States is kind of like DoorDash, but it's specifically made to deliver lunches via lunchboxes to workers in office buildings and places where they cannot easily access food. It's quite an interesting cultural thing that happens, and there's a whole cultural piece around it as well. But so anyway, so she writes these letters, and he gets the lunchbox by mistake. But then subsequently, because he received that first lunchbox, he continues to get the lunchboxes, and then he starts to write back to her. And she does not know that it's not her husband writing back. This goes on for quite some time until she discovers that her husband is having an affair. Eventually, they, do realize that who they're talking to somebody different. And in y- the only thing that I don't like about this, unconventional, it definitely is. I mean, just in terms of a love story, it's a love story that happens sort of by accident. And honestly, I love the idea of exchanging love letters to fall in love. It's one of those sort of kind of tropey things, but it's so satisfying. Um, and it's so pure. It just absolutely is pure. It's pure to the point where when he sees her sitting at the table waiting to meet him, he has to turn around and leave because doesn't believe that he doesn't believe that he's worthy, that he's too old, that he's, not handsome enough, and she's young and beautiful. And it really kind of like it makes things very awkward for him. um what I think makes this so unconventionally cool is sometimes when the idea of falling in love is handed down in text, in written form, we see the purer parts of who we are. And so we don't necessarily have to rely on, is your hair pretty enough? Do you have pretty eyes? Are you skinny? Are you fat? Do you have the right toes, the right whatever? There's something very genuine about falling in love with someone who writes to you because you sort of see them without any of the external trappings. And this made for such a compelling movie. It was extremely emotional on a lot of different sides. The main character, the main protagonist, Sejan, I'm sorry if I'm saying that wrong, but Sejan is honestly one of the most forthright characters I think I've seen portrayed in a really long time. Um, there's just no extra to him. He just is who he is on the screen. And each time there's something that happens between the two of them, it feels like there is this wonderful sort of escalation in sort of first time romance that neither of them fully really understand. It does kind of have not a, I wouldn't say it has like a happy ending, but it has a hopeful ending. So I won't tell you what that is, but it does feel pretty hopeful. I really loved this movie. I really loved the idea of that particular type of romance being allowed to flourish. And the fact that it all happens kind of by mistake feels a little bit like, oh, did fate reach out its hand and kind of bring the two of them together? So, The Lunchbox from 2013. It's I think that it is I think it's originally Hindi. So just, be aware, obviously, that it's foreign language.
Naturally, I'm looking it up to add to my list.
It's good. It's very good.
It's on Stars, so I'll be able to watch it. That's good to know.
Good. Very good. You'll have to tell me what you think of this movie.
I've been on a that kind of bender as of late.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, this one actually works well in that cabal of films that you've been interested in. Really does.
And it's our second indie movie of the night.
Yeah.
Hmm. It's almost like good movies can be made in other places.
Crazy, right? Absolutely
Who
crazy.
knew?
Yeah, who knew?
Well, my number one, because here we are. Number
Number
one
one.
is one of my favorite movies. Period. And it's one that I've had an opportunity to talk about on this show before, so I'm gonna keep it short and sweet. but my number one is Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind.
Oh, good. That's a good choice.
What happens when you take two people that fall so hard in love that when they fall out of love, the only acceptable way to deal with it is to erase them from your mind? That's what the story is about. Going through Joel's memories and using this technology to erase them, erase her from his mind is, well, one, just from a psychological standpoint, probably not a healthy way to, you know, face your problems. Just throwing that out there. But when you start seeing these memories, these not so great memories tied in with the great memories, because after all, there's a reason they fell so hard for each other, right? There's a reason they were they to begin with. And to start losing that, like in real time, is it's tragic. Joel and Clementine is um it's a romance that plays out in full. Now, what the movie makes you question is, where are you seeing it? If you haven't seen Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, I will take very, very careful precautions to not give anything away. But I will say, when it comes to their timeline, it's you have to pay attention. This is one of those movies that has a lot of intricate details as you go through not only, Joel's memories, but also you learn a bit about the staff that are actually performing the procedure. And there's a lot of ethical questions as to whether or not something like this should be done. And there's, of course, the questions, as I've mentioned, about whether or not it's even mentally healthy to do it, let alone physically, altering the brain. But it's a movie that raises questions that aren't even about love and relationships, but it's centered around these two people, Joel and Clementine, and how they may or may not be destined to be together. And finding someone that can make you love so hard and hurt equally as hard is an interesting story to tell. Usually, when it comes to love stories, you only get the one part. And some of my picks tonight have also focused on what happens when it's over. And I think that's an important counterbalance to the happily ever after that storytelling in general has been telling us for eons. Because at the end of the day, relationships should be looked at realistically. And as this is going to be an obscure reference that only a handful of people will probably understand. But the people that get it will get it. Terry James, a nationally syndicated uh, radio host, is has a great quote, and he says, "All relationships end either in death or dumping," and that's not something we see anybody focus on very much when it comes to love stories. So, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind is my number one because we see the rise and fall of a beautiful, and some might say toxic relationship. But in the end of the day, everybody learns something from every relationship they're in. And not every bad relationship makes you a worse person. If you know what lessons to take, even the worst people you're with can make you a better person. So that's why it's my number one.
It's a good choice. It's definitely a good choice. Um,
Hopefully, I made
okay.
sense talking about it.
Um, okay. My number one film is a movie that I have seen a grand total of three, maybe four times. Um, After the last time that I watched it, I decided that I really couldn't watch it anymore because it emotionally takes such a toll on me. I mean, I can watch Old Boy again because I know what happens and I'm prepared and it's okay. I can watch Splice, as icky as it is, again and again and again, and it's not a big deal. Uh, Chucky, yeah, I can watch that anytime. Um, None of the movies on my list hit me with the same depth. And don't roll your eyes when I say this, or if you do, don't let me see it. Um, the movie is AI. Clearly, AI is a Pinocchio story. A I want to be a real boy story. But it is so much more complex than that. Um, in an age where there are less and less humans, cybernetic programmers have created a world of something called mechas, and the mechas are supposed to interact with humans in a way that approximates human interaction. And this is basically to keep human function going. Um, Now, the part that makes this so difficult is the part where the young child comes in. There's a cybertronic child that comes into the picture, and he's adopted by the family that he grows up with, or grows to know. And his name is David. And David embarks on a quest to understand real love. Um, it's so emotionally powerful to me that it's actually hard to watch, especially the end. There's I guess there's a couple of things that I want to say about this movie in terms of why I chose it, right? Because it's clearly not the kind of romance that's like a standard you follow boy meets girl romance. This is the kind of romantic, well, not even romantic, but it's the kind of love that you feel, and even when you can't define it, you yearn for it in such a way that it just pulls you in directions that challenge you, that make you, that put you in danger, that give you, you know, all of the feels, just all of them. I hesitated to put this at the top of my list because I realized that it's not like, a oh hey, let's, go into the chapel and going to get married kind of thing. But honestly, I felt like the convention or unconvention of understanding artificial intelligence as it relates to love, and I do think we kind of see that with the mecha that is played by Jude Law, um, is so complicated and so absolutely fraught with difficulty from both the part of the human and the part of the mechas themselves, that that it is a story infinitely worth exploring. Now, if you don't know, this particular movie is actually based on a book, which I, after I saw it the last time, went to go check out at the library. It's called Super Toys Last All Summer Long. Um, it it was written by Brian Adis. The book is a bit different from the adaptation that Steven Spielberg made with David in AI, but it follows enough of the original story that it's easily identifiable. I think again, I'm kind of stumbling a little bit because I think part of the reason that I find this particular story so incredibly compelling when it comes to the love aspect is because it's the purest desire to understand love that powers everything that David does. And it's very easy to sort of see what love isn't in this world, but it's not very easy to understand what love is and what kind of, I guess, the ultimate sacrifices, the absolute dedication to understanding it so that you can express it, so that you can have someone else feel it with you, is just such a beautiful story in this that I felt like it just needed to be here. Um, I mean, I guess there's a lot of other stories that could have been a little bit more like, oh, this is about a couple, or, but I feel like this, the purest aspect of this is exactly what unconventional love really is. Unconventional love is at its heart something that perhaps we don't really understand, and sometimes we mock, and sometimes it feels weird, but if we really peel back some layers, a la Shrek, we can kind of see that there are real emotions happening underneath the surface. And all of those emotions are things that every single one of us has felt. Um, so AI gets my number one spot. I hope that that works for everyone. I'm so sorry that it's not the standard romance, but for a list of unconventional sort of love romance uh, list movies, this just absolutely fit for me. So that's what I've got. AI.
Okay. I will say I've seen it.
Did you cry?
Of course. Yes.
I mean, sometimes I think if people, okay, no, that's, I shouldn't say it that way because that's actually kind of condescending and rude. Uh, Sometimes it's difficult for me to understand how people can watch a movie like AI and not be moved by it. And I do know people that have seen this movie and they're just like, yeah, so okay, well, whatever. And
Yeah.
to me, I just have such a, I don't know, there's some primal connection that I have with this, with the both the subject matter and the idea of like truly trying to understand, well, what does it mean to be love, or what does it mean to be loved, or what does it mean to love? Like, how do we, how do we even untangle that at all? How do we even begin to process what that means?
Hmm.
And the fact that an AI is on that quest is just like, it's such a, it's such a brilliant way of showing us how little we really do know about what love really is.
I want to know what love is.
Truly, 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 yes. Also, Jude Law in this movie is just so good. I
Yes.
just absolutely love him in this film.
Although in an alternate world, an alternate universe out there, Kubrick got to finish making it. I wonder what that
I
would look like.
it okay, so hot take, and maybe this will be unpopular, but I'm really glad that it was Steven Spielberg, because I feel like at this moment in time, at the moment in time in 2001 when this was made, I feel like Steven Spielberg had the right tools and the right frame of mind, the right storytelling chops to make this something grand. And I think it would have been visually stunning if had done it. I think it would have been a beautiful cinematic journey that we would have taken. But I don't know if the story would have been as good as Steven Spielberg gave us. And I guess we'll never know, but I have to say that I'm really glad that it is what it is.
Oh, I'm definitely not, negating the greatness that we got, but there will always be a part of me that's like, I wonder what that would have looked like, though.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's
Yeah, I
yeah.
agree.
Well, how about you run down your list for the evening, and then I'll run down mine and give you your homework.
All right. Okay, well, starting at number 10, I have The Lake House. Number 9, Ruby Sparks. Number 8, Let the Right One In. Number 7, King Kong from 2005. Number 6, Splice. Number 5, Old Boy. Number 4, Chucky and Tiffany Ray, Bride of Chucky. Number 3, Dangerous Liaisons. Number 2, The Lunchbox from 2013. And number 1, breaks my heart to say it, AI.
As always, a wonderful list. My number 10, La Sing Chara. My number 9, Always Be My Maybe. Number 8, Chasing Amy. Number 7, Shrek. Number 6, Warm Bodies. Number 5, Palm Springs. Number 4, Lars and the Real Girl. Number 3, Her. Number 2, The Lobster. And number 1, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. Those are our lists for tonight. Are you ready for your homework?
I really am.
Now, as usual, my topic's probably going to be a bit more broad in scope, and it's not necessarily, like I said, it's not going to be laser focused, but I think it's definitely a topic that has sort of been on the back of my mind since I was a kid, and every time I see a movie about it, I am instantly intrigued. So I want to see what your list is when it comes to our top 10 movies about the afterlife.
Oh, that's an interesting idea.
I think so too. It could be anything. It could be, just it could be a ghost story. It could be a story where you pass and you have a lot of bureaucracy to deal with um, to get wherever you need to go. It could be any number of things. Um, so hence the sort of broadness uh, with the scope. And I, as usual, automatically have a couple things come to mind, but I'm going to take my standard deep dive. And what I'm really kind of, hoping comes of this is a little bit of a conversation of, wouldn't this be great if this is what happened, or wouldn't that be great? Things like that, or wouldn't this be awful? Maybe there's a movie where someone is forced to stay in their house, for all of eternity and never allowed to leave.
I mean, that was COVID, so
Yeah.
apparently we're all in purgatory. Sorry.
So, movies of the afterlife. That's what's coming at you next week, right here on
Nice.
10-1. You know, there are a lot of unconventional love stories out there right? But sometimes you want an unconventional recipe to pair with it. Where can I find one of those?
Listen, the fastest way to get to either a man or a woman in terms of unconventional romance is to bring them good food or make it. And yeah, I think I might be able to help sort of with some of that. Anyway, like I was saying about Shrek, we have a great and fun, silly recipe for everyone loves a good parfait over at moviesandmeals.com. So join me over there. Lots of sort of change up stuff. We're still getting rid of Christmas stuff. So it's a little bit like, the people that leave their Christmas lights up for a couple weeks too many. Yeah, that's us. We're working on it. But until we get it all changed out, there's still some quirky Christmas things going on. Also, join me on my TV Dinners podcast on a brand new night, Tuesday at 3:30 Hawaiian time, 9:30 Eastern. Lots of fun. We continue to explore a new format with news of TV streaming, a little bit of a deep dive in terms of something happening in the world, some new TV content or something that's happening. And then we kind of follow it up with, hey, what's coming soon? So, real fun. Join us on Tuesday nights for that. And Josh, how can we find you? Because you have a ton of awesome things that you're doing all the time.
Yeah, yeah. And I try to keep pretty busy. Yeah, every Friday night, it's the Wadcast at 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific, over at the Wadcast Facebook page. It's one of the shows that's all about writers, actors, and directors, and all of those wonderful jobs on a set in between. Talk about hot topics related to the industry. And you know what? People always ask, what are you going to talk about Friday, Josh? And I say the same thing every time. I don't know. I'm not psychic, and it's not 5 minutes before the show. I'm not saying we don't prepare for the show that's coming up, but I am saying that sometimes we do that preparing 5 minutes or so before the show actually starts. Just putting that out there. So what's the show going to be about? No, but it's going to be a good one because it always is. Episode number 117 coming up this Friday. If you want to know more about Wadco Media in general and all of its wonderful shows, just go to wadcomedia.com. That's a website. And don't forget to go to all of the wonderful links that populate that page so you can get to the socials and hit the likes and do the follows and maybe go over to the Patreon and say, hey, I like this and I want some of these perks. Honestly, I don't remember what they are because I don't really Patreon. You know what? It's there if you want, I guess, but I'm not really worried about it. If you really want to, pause for the cause, hit the merch shop because I think it's got some pretty interesting designs for the shows represented there. Plus, I feel better that you get something for your cash. So if there's something you like enough to, you know, sport a shirt or a coffee mug or anything like that for, go to wadcomedia.com, follow the links, and go ahead and get it because why not? Life's short. Support your favorite podcasters, right? Um, yeah, that's it. That's it. That's the show. That's um, yeah. Checking the runtime. Hmm, Yeah, that's the show.
I feel like we did a pretty good job this time.
I I I think so too. As usual, talking about the things we love is fun, and it's fun to do with you, and it's fun to do with all of our great people watching and listening. Y'all, the best.
Much fun. Much fun. We'll see you next time.
Have a great and wonderful weekend. Yeah, what Jen said. We will see. I'm buying time because I'm trying to find the tag. We'll see you next time.